Greetings, humans, and welcome to the Smoke Show. I am, of course, your host, Josh Smokey-Hell Nelson. And joining us today, we have the host of the Codebreaker podcast, part of the RotoUnderworld lineup, as well as Director of Analytics for both RotoUnderworld and PlayerProfiler.com. It is my sincere pleasure to introduce Josh Larky. Now, I know your day is going at least well because of the incredible first name you have, but how is your day truly going?
Today's been really good, actually. I have had this large article all about stacking, how to do it, why you should be doing it. And it's been sort of on the, I want to say back burner because that makes it seem like it's not a priority. It's a huge priority. But I kind of had writer's block about 3/4 of the way through. And it is nearly done now. So today was very productive in that sense. It always feels good when you can just kind of like check something like that off the docket. So I would say that by tonight, it will be all ready for edits by the editing team. And I don't think there's any better feeling than when you have an article that you've poured a few weeks of research and writing into, and then you look at it and go, you know what, this puppy's pretty much done. So it's been a great day. How about you?
Oh, pretty fantastic, man. But that's good. That's a good feeling. Did the weekend retreat help?
Yeah, so I should probably come clean about that. I just hung out this weekend. I posted on Twitter that I was taking a fine dining and etiquette retreat for the weekend, which I'm sure all my super close friends on Twitter were like, dude, what are you talking about? Because I'm just such a messy guy and not a fine dining person. I basically just wanted to take a few day break from Twitter. I felt like there were some people that had been quote tweeting me, and I felt like I didn't really enjoy some of the recent interactions that I'd have with people. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to take 3 days off. So when I talked to Matt Kelly, my boss, he said, when you take a few days off Twitter, you should make a post about something really strange and see if people believe it as to why you're taking time off. And for some reason, everyone believed it. I mean, I don't know if I look like the fine dining and etiquette retreat type, but apparently everyone thought I was. So I guess I didn't give any, there were no giveaways there apparently. But no, I just relaxed, hung out with the girlfriend, walked the dog, worked on a big puzzle of mine, had some beers. I don't know. It was a good weekend.
That's good. Nothing wrong with that, man. I gotta admit, I bought a hook, line, sinker, so fantastic. And I gotta admit, out of the two of us, only one of us has a collar on right now, so we'll give you points on that one. But the original impetus behind this interview was actually a Twitter thread that you posted recently that contained not only a cursory overview of your relevant background, but some whimsical and deeply personal moments as well. The humanizing element that seemed to catch fire from that thread was the comment about eating, and I quote, 5 to 10 burritos every single week the past 7 years, end quote. The people need to know, what is it that draws you to the almighty burrito?
So I've always enjoyed burritos my entire life. I grew up in San Diego. We have really good burrito places. And it's just one of those comfort foods that I grew up eating throughout my childhood. When I was in late high school, early college, I was not making a ton of money. Finances were a little tight. And when eating out, a burrito is really inexpensive. When you're at home, you can just kind of cobble together a lot of inexpensive ingredients like beans, rice, a random meat, some cheese, throw it in a tortilla, and then it feels like a meal. So I just kind of started down that path. And once I started, I realized that I liked how much money I was saving. They tasted better and better the more creative I got and just the better I got at making them. And now I start many days off with a breakfast burrito. I did this morning. Frequently, I'll have a dinner burrito, sometimes a lunch burrito. I don't know. I just kind of thought about it and was like, you know what? I've definitely had 5 to 10 burritos the past 7 years, pretty much every single week. I can't really think of a week where I didn't hit at least the 5 quota. So it's a comfort food that makes me really happy. It's quick and easy to eat. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Absolutely. Those are very cogent points on that. Now, did you kind of gradually step up to the homemade fresh stuff, or did you kind of start with, the frozen burritos and kind of work up to that? Or was it just always there? You're like, bam, these are so easy to make. Why not?
It's kind of all over the place. So right now I I should be sponsored by this company, honestly. It's the EVOL burrito. I don't know if it's pronounced Evol or something, but they have a green one. It's this veggie burrito. I'm not even a vegetarian, but their veggie burrito, let me tell you, it just tastes better than their meat one. So I would say 4 to 5 days a week, I'll eat that for breakfast. It's just like eggs, potatoes, jalapeno, pinto beans. I don't know. It's actually a really loaded one. And then I also like to make my own breakfast burritos. When I make my own, I really like hash browns, eggs, and avocado as the big three. I think those just go really well together. And recently I treated myself, so I got some fresh chorizo. So I've actually made breakfast and dinner burritos recently with chorizo. And my stomach doesn't always feel great after those, not going to lie, but let me tell you, they taste phenomenal.
Hey, sometimes that's the sacrifice you got to make for a little bit of flavor. Okay, so corn tortilla, wheat tortilla, or flour tortilla. What's your preference there?
It's always one of the big flour tortillas. I'll throw it in the toaster, and I'll get it a little warm, get it a little bit puffed up, and then I immediately throw everything in there once it gets nice and warm. And that's usually the way to do it. So at least, I mean, I'll eat corn tortillas, I'll eat the wheat tortillas, I'll eat pretty much any tortilla, but by choice, it's a large flour tortilla. The bigger, the better, actually.
Nice. I'm just getting hungry here. We got to move on to another question, or else I'm just going to be thinking about burritos all night, man. So for those of you out there who don't know, PlayerProfiler.com is one of the most user-friendly sites out there for getting advanced analytic information to give you an edge in your fantasy football leagues. What exactly does being the director of analytics for Player Profile entail, and how did it come about? And feel free to go back as far as necessary.
So this one actually goes back a few years. I think it's a fun story. I was studying business analytics in grad school, basically just trying to break into the sports analytics field. And I kind of felt like after college, I didn't quite have enough coding and technical skills to fully make it in the sports analytics jobs that I was applying to. So I went to grad school, and most of the way in, I was able to land a baseball analytics internship with the Detroit Tigers, which I ended up doing right out of school. And I went to a conference that was a sports analytics conference in the Boston area shortly after accepting that internship. So I was in no way looking for any type of jobs. I was sitting high and pretty. I was like, oh man, I am working in baseball. I mean, little did I know that 60-hour work weeks and minimum wage would take its toll pretty quickly. And that was not the right career for me. But at the time, I was stoked.
How can you not be?
So I'm at this sports analytics conference, and I was just going panel to panel. I had been in a baseball one. I wanted to hit a football panel. And the panel I was in got out late. So I showed up to this football panel and sat in the very back of the room to learn about cutting edge football analytics at the time. And I happened to sit next to none other than Matt Kelly, the founder and owner of PlayerProfiler.com. I was not a huge fantasy football person at the time. I casually played. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know who what the site was. I knew nothing. All I knew is that this guy's sitting next to me, and we just had some small talk. Teddy Bruschi, former Patriots linebacker, was on this panel, and he said something that was just really foolish to say at an analytics conference. And Matt turns to me quietly and goes, you know, this Teddy Bruschi's a real dumbass, isn't he? And that really broke the ice. We started talking. He finds out I code and I'm in grad school, and he offers to pay me the nice sum of $10 an hour to do some coding for him. And I jumped at the opportunity. I thought, wow, I'm in grad school. I can always use some money. It's not like I'm going to be making a lot of money in baseball anyway. Let's make some money on the weekend. So I started just randomly helping him with coding scripts in grad school. And I kind of worked for him on the side while I worked in baseball I worked for 2 different teams, did that for about 2 years. And then I ended up being COVID furloughed because I was on the business analytics side with the San Diego Padres at that time. And when COVID happened and there were no fans in the stands, all my attendance projection models and customer journeys, none of that matters when there's no fans. So I get COVID furloughed and then eventually COVID laid off. So during that time, because I'd been working like 5 to 10 hour weeks for Matt on the weekends, I just kind of stepped up my involvement. And we had a really good season together where I was working full time during the 2020 season on a lot of our DFS work and just kind of vetting our projections and helping out with that. So once the season ended and I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do, Matt said that he would be able to create a legitimate salaried full-time position. So I got kind of lucky in that sense that I'd been working with him at that point for around 3 years, kind of on and off. And we had built a definite level of trust together where I'd helped out with a lot of projects. So it worked out really well that I was at a point in my life where I didn't really know what I was going to do. All I knew at the time was that what I had done in fantasy football in 2020 was the most fun I'd ever had working. So I, of course, was like, yes, I would love to do this full-time journey and see where it takes me. So in terms of what I actually do week to week, it's kind of a mix of long-term projects, vetting stuff that's been up on the site. So this week, a few things I'm doing is I'm going to be adjusting some of our rankings and projections. Every 3 to 4 weeks, I update our rankings, update our projections as news comes in. I try not to update things every week because A, I don't have enough time to do that. And then B, sometimes you overreact. So you'll hear something and a player might say something or a coach might say something, and then a player's ADP tanks for a week. And then it shoots right back up. And it's like, why would you adjust your rankings? Nothing even happened. So this is kind of that week of the month to do that. I also do a lot of podcasting for my Codebreaker podcast where I'll do research and kind of break down complex concepts and try and make what I think has been kind of like I call it like the gatekeepers of fantasy football, where there's people out there that understand concepts like stacking, that understand player projections, but they might not want to or be incentivized to have the general public understand what they know. And I'm kind of in a unique position where my main the main money that I make in fantasy football is through this job. So I'm actually incentivized to do well at my job and to help give people advice to help them win in DFS, season-long, dynasty, best ball. Whereas most people, the way that they make money on the side is through being really good in those leagues. And they don't want anyone else to know their secrets. So I'm kind of in that unique position where I'm really incentivized at all times to kind of share all that I know with people and help them understand that all the projections behind our site, a lot of the advanced metrics that I've been coding those up, and here's kind of my thought process behind a lot of what I do. Now you can see into my mind and understand why things are the way they are. And then hopefully people will then subscribe to our site as they understand all that goes into everything we put out. So I do podcasting. I do just straight coding where I'm just in a dark room plugging away. I write articles. So I'm working on the stacking article that'll come out sometime this week. So it's kind of fun. It's kind of like a smorgasbord of everything nerdy in fantasy football that I enjoy.
Now, when you say that you're incentivized by being more forthcoming with process, with being transparent about it, do you think that's more liberating? Do you find that it takes constraints off where you're constantly looking for the newest and the best and the most accurate ways to provide these metrics to the populace, and you're able to share that right away, so you don't have to be in the dark about it. You can openly ask for collaboration if you so chose to, which I don't think that's a huge part of your process, but my guess.
Yeah, I would say that you hit the nail on the head with that, where when I discover something, obviously it'd be fun if I just jumped for joy and just posted on Twitter. I'm like, here's the answer, everyone. I found it. But that's not usually how it works. But what I like to do is when I'm onto something is I'll run it by other people that work at PlayerProfiler. We'll discuss it. We'll have a few meetings. I'll present some findings and we'll kind of debate it. I'll try and have people tear it apart and tell me why it's wrong and come up with a list of questions that I need to go back to the drawing board to and try and figure out how could someone potentially disprove this? Here's some angles of my analysis that I initially missed that I need to hit on and make sure that it holds up. And if it doesn't hold up, why? And then after that, I'll try and present it to the public in some form. So I would say that it's liberating in the sense that it's just nice. I like having the public be informed. I like knowing that I'm able, or at least trying to help the average fantasy gamer elevate their play and win more money. And yeah, I think it's a lot of fun to do work that hasn't publicly been done before, because I'm sure a decent amount of what I do, somebody out there has researched to some extent, but very few of them have any incentive to share it. And that if you're a professional fantasy football player and that you're grinding DraftKings all day, like there's a lot of people out there like that. And they have absolutely zero incentive to ever share any of their ownership projections or to discuss why it's important to stack your quarterback and receiver and what the numbers behind it say, because the last thing that they want to do is jeopardize their job. And that's the same with me. I agree. I'm not taking any shots at them. By all means, you need to make your own money first. It just so happens that the way I make money is through helping others. So I enjoy that aspect of my job.
No, that's good. I like that. Let's dive into a little bit of football talk. As a thought experiment, my love for Mr. Kyle Anthony Pitts has never been hidden from anyone. If anyone's watching the video version of this, I do have my Kyle Pitts shirt on, and I am sitting on my Florida Gators fleece blanket. As a thought experiment, how would Kyle Pitts have profiled in your eyes if he declared for the draft as a wide receiver? Who would he comp to with the amazing skill set that he has coming in?
I really like this question. A couple months ago, someone DM'd me something similar where they asked, hey, by the way, did you ever run the breakout finder model to see what Pitts would have been if he were a receiver? And it's not super cut and dry. And I'll kind of explain why and be kind of a downer, but then I'll be sort of an upper when I talk about my actual projection for him for this coming season. So let's just say that Kyle Pitts is a wide receiver. He has, you can't get more alpha sized than, 6'7", 245. There's not a lot of wide receivers bigger than him. He'd probably be 99th percentile in both of those. Kind of like believe it or not, a bigger Calvin Johnson in terms of the size comp, and then the speed comp would be he'd basically be slightly bigger, slightly slower Calvin Johnson at face value. Because I think Calvin was 6'5", 230, was running in the high 4.3s. Pitts is in the 4.4s with about 10, 15 pounds on him. The part that's difficult to translate is that his actual production numbers, if we were treating him like a wide receiver, are not particularly impressive. And I'll give you kind of an example of that. So his full season in 2019, when he played 13 games, he had about a 17% target share, which for a tight end, we at Player Profiler, we determine that as a breakout. We think that's incredible. Wow, 17% target share. But if we want to think about receivers that have had a higher target share than that, it's not necessarily that impressive from a pure production standpoint. So I'll give you an example. Devonta Smith, yes, he could have declared for the draft in 2019, in 2020. And I'm sure he would have been drafted. He would have done just fine. But no one was like, oh, this is the obvious first round pick, Devonta Smith. And his junior season, his target share was 21%. And that was playing with guys that were first round NFL talents. Mm-hmm. So even with increased competition compared to what Kyle Pitts played with, he had a 21% target share. Pitts, the year before this one in a full season, 17%. So right there, we can already see that his target share just isn't quite going to live up to a lot of other players. And that you'll see a lot of wide receivers that get taken on day 3 where they're decently athletic and their best target share in a season will be 15 to 16 to 17% like Pitts. So that's really where he would struggle, is in the production profile. So I'm trying to think of who that would be. It would kind of be like Chase Claypool, where overall the community wasn't super high on him. And it's because he kind of lacked what many of us, myself included, kind of wanted as requisite production. He ended up being just fine in the NFL, But I do think that he was sort of a risky prospect where we didn't really see that much production from him, and that the wow factor was in his size and speed. And that's kind of what I think Pitts would be, where he's not really polarizing right now in the sense that we all think he's the tight end one in this class. Everyone thinks that who plays Dynasty, this is a top 3, top 4 Dynasty tight end. There's kind of a consensus there. But I think if you were a wide receiver, it would be a lot more like a Claypool thing where it's like, is it raw athleticism and size? Is it production? So that's why I think that it's kind of a difficult puzzle, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I'm happy he didn't come in as a wide receiver, but no, I got nothing but high hopes for Kyle Pitts. He was looking into my roster ship percentages the other day, and he is my first player that I've ever gone double digits on, and I've got getting up towards 50% roster ship with him.
There we go.
I'm very happy about. And for me, it's a opportunity cost thing too. He is not going to come down from this price in my eyes. So if you're going to want to get him, it's going to be now, and it's not going to be with the hopes that he is going to Kelsey the hell out this year. You got to be thinking long term. You got to be thinking 4D chess, not checkers, not yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So another guy that I can throw out just for a target share standpoint is Rashad Bateman, who I think is a great prospect. His freshman season at age 18, he commanded 27% of the targets in Minnesota. So 27% is freshman Bateman, 17% for sophomore Pitts. So there's another comparison where the production just wouldn't quite live up to what most first round wide receivers have. He'd be kind of like a Henry Ruggs in the sense that you're relying on tools rather than production kind of. Mm-hmm. I mean, he'd be better than Ruggs just in the sense that he's a lot bigger. And even his weak production for a receiver would still be better than what Ruggs had. Yeah. But that's just kind of an idea of why I'd be hesitant were he a receiver and why I actually prefer him at tight end. Mm-hmm. And then in terms of rookie year expectations, this was a tough one for me because as a hardcore analytics guy, I don't like predicting an outlier. Mm-hmm. But after the Julio trade, when I redid my projections, Kyle Pitts' rookie projection currently looks like the most historic rookie tight end season that we've had the past 25 years. And the reason for that is if we look at the Falcons offense, who's their clear number one? It's Ridley. Calvin Ridley's going to have the most targets on that team if healthy. Pitts is not going to be close. This is Ridley's show. We saw it last year when Julio went down. Ridley can ball.
Yes. Who's
the second best receiver there? Is it Russell Gage? Olamide Zaccheaus? Maybe I'm pronouncing that wrong. Is it Christian Blake? Is it the surprising workhorse running back, Mike Davis? No, it's clearly Kyle Pitts. And when you're on a top 5 pass volume offense as the entrenched number 2 best passing option, you're probably going to get fed. And I believe that Julio leaving was kind of an indication that the Falcons will have Kyle Pitts split out wide and that he's not just going to play the traditional tight end position and that they might give him a lot more of the usage that some of the newer age tight ends like Mike Gesicki have been having, where the tight end position is historically focused a good amount on blocking. I don't believe you take a tight end as early as the Falcons did to have him block a lot, especially like, do you really want Kyle Pitts going against guys 50 pounds heavier than him, putting his body on the line so Mike Davis can get a 4-yard run to the outside? I certainly don't see that happening. So I have Kyle Pitts projected really well. I don't remember what my projections for him are, but I want to say around 70 catches, 950 yards, and then I think 6 touchdowns, something like that. But if you put it all together, it's a stat line that we haven't quite seen from a rookie tight end since fantasy football began. So I'm very optimistic about Pitts post Julio trade because I just don't see any way that Russell Gage or Olamide Zaccheaus is going to be on the outside opposite Ridley. Defenses aren't going to respect that. These guys are incredibly undersized. Insert Kyle Pitts. So I'm excited for his rookie season.
I'm definitely in line with you on that one. But the thing that really killed me about it was when it came out that they knew that Julio was gone before the draft, and they still took Pitts at 4th overall. That's what I can't get out of my head. Like they could have replaced him with Jamar Chase. They could have gone O-line and just, really laid that offense on Ryan, and Ridley's back. There's a lot of ways they could have gone, but they went Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, it's if you think about it, the franchise has been mismanaged. If they had been able to keep Julio, great. It looks like they're putting all their chips in on this year, and they're saying, you know what? We have the band back together for one more season. Let's see what happens. Yeah, our defense is shit, but at the end of the day, we have Julio, Ridley, Pitts, Matt Ryan, a decent O-line. I mean, I guess Mike Davis in the backfield. Who knows? Hopefully Melvin Gordon gets cuts and then they can have him as in the backfield as well, I guess. I don't know. But you can sort of see the pieces coming together where it's a sneaky team that might win a lot of shootouts. But with Julio gone, how do you not at this point say, it's time to rebuild? Why don't you grab a quarterback or someone like Sewell to start rebuilding the offensive line, and then you take a quarterback next year after you tank again, get a high pick, grab a quarterback. Now you have a better O-line, a quarterback, you have Ridley. You could have taken a receiver in the 2nd or 3rd round of the draft to start filling that in. But now it kind of looks like this weird rebuild where they don't look like they're going to be very good this year. They're probably not going to be very good next year. And I think Kyle Pitts is a great player, but I mean, the track record of teams building championship rosters via the 1st round tight end, it's a pretty tenuous, it's iffy. I mean, we have Hawkinson, Fant, Ebron, OJ Howard. None of these guys were on good teams. And yes, I know the Buccaneers won the Super Bowl, but you want to know why they won the Super Bowl in part? Well, I don't know, but OJ Howard was not even out on the field. But yeah, you look at Ebron and the teams he's been on, Hawkinson on the Lions, Fant on the Broncos. The 1st round tight end does not seem like it's very correlated. I know it's a small sample, but still, this is not necessarily the position that's going to help you win real football games. So I think he's going to be really fun in fantasy, but in terms of real football, what the Falcons have done the last few seasons with their drafts and contracts, they're kind of head scratchers.
Dude, they passed on CD at 16. They passed on CD Lamb at 16th overall. Come on. Now, full disclosure, I am a diehard Cowboys fan. So when I heard that they passed on CD at 16, I nearly put my fist through the roof as I was bathing my son. But I digress. Yes, I agree. The Falcons have not made very good moves as of late. But we'll see. I have the highest of hopes for Kyle Pitts, but I'm a realist. I don't think he's going to be some second coming of Christ out there. But I'm excited to see this kid's career, and I'm really excited to see what he can do as the number 2 option in a pass-friendly offense. It's going to be in a lot of shootouts, like you said. They might not win them all, but they're going to be in them because of that suspect defense and everything. So I like the chances for him. I mean, depending on when you got him, where you got him, he might pay off on ADP. He's rising, but I'm in. I'm 100,000,000% in on Kyle Pitts. Now let's move on a little bit here. Let's put your analytical skills to good use. Who are 2 players that you were higher than consensus on and 2 players you were lower on? And why should fantasy players be running to or from these players in drafts?
So I just want to point out, I love that you say, let's put your analytical skills to good use, as if it is not incredible use for me to get you super hyped up about Kyle Pitts. But I'll let that one slide. So
I don't need help there, brother.
I'll go with 2 different dichotomies because I always think it's fun to compare players.
Yes.
So we'll start off, since we've been talking about tight ends, we're just going to stay on tight ends for one more minute. I'm above consensus on TJ Hawkinson and below consensus on Mark Andrews. And I'll kind of lay out why that kind of makes sense, where if you really like Hawkinson, you're naturally not going to like Andrews. If we look at tight ends that are real difference makers, the guys like a Kelsey, a Waller, a Kittle, obviously they're athletic, They're good at football. But one big thing that they all have in common, which I think in many ways is the most important, they have a very clear and obvious path to massive target volume. Waller was the number one option on the Raiders last year. Kelsey was the number, or I guess Kels, as I recently learned. Kels was the number one.
Did you buy that?
I'm still in shock, but we'll just call him we'll call him Travie K. So Travie K, number one option in Kansas City, and then Kittle when he plays is generally the number one option in that 49ers pass attack. Mm-hmm. That is what I see for Hawkinson. I love DeAndre Swift, but do I think he's going to out-target Hawkinson? No. Do I think career journeymen Tyrell Williams and Rashad Perriman are going to out-target Hawkinson? No. Who else? Quintez Cephas, the guy who runs a 4.7 and was a day 3 wide receiver? No. Amon-Ra St. Brown, another day 3 wide receiver who's incredibly slow? No. This is Hawkinson's pass offense. Mm-hmm. And when you can just kind of pencil a guy in for 120 to 130 targets, the ceiling is super high, the floor is super high. Mm-hmm. And I think that having Hawkinson go around where Andrews goes right now in drafts, it's just criminal. And that you have to be pulling the trigger on Hawkinson every time, because outside of an injury, it's really, really hard to see Hawkinson failing. I mean, I don't even care about the touchdowns. He could have 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns. It's fine. He looks a lot like 2018 George Kittle. The Niners in 2018, this was not a good team. Kittle came out of seemingly nowhere because he was the number one option there. And that's what I like about Hawkinson, is that he's the de facto number one option. We don't care how good the offense is. We just want our tight end to get 120 targets. Hawkinson's going to do that.
Volume, baby.
Andrews, on the other hand, has never sniffed 100 targets in a season. He hasn't gotten there yet. Hawkinson even got there last year, playing with Marvin Jones and a third of a season or whatever it was with Galladay. But Andrews has never got there. The Ravens, much lower volume. And I actually talked about this. He was one of the players that I profiled for the Player Profiler draft kit. I did a video actually on Andrews. And I kind of did it like this. I was like, remember how good he was in 2019 when he had that 23.4% target share and you loved him. And then unfortunately, his target share dropped in 2020 from 23.4% to just kidding. It rose to 24%. Mark Andrews had a larger share of the pie last year, and he stunk for where you were getting him. And it's because this is just a low volume passing attack. And if you want kind of a mid-range volume tight end who's touchdown dependent, that's Mark Andrews. Could he get you 10 to 15 touchdowns and pay off at ADP? Sure. Am I going to buy a tight end there? No, I am not, because the mid-volume touchdown-dependent tight end sounds like about 10 guys out there this season. That is why with Andrews, it's just, I can't fathom being overexposed to a guy who's really going to need double-digit touchdowns. I know, yes, he has a good target share, but it's still a low-volume attack. They brought in Bateman, who's a real alpha wide receiver, and I expect to be the target leader starting this year. I mean, if Andrews couldn't even hit 100 targets and he's competing with 155-pound Hollywood Brown, Willie Snead, Miles Boykin, that does not bode well when an actually talented number one receiver shows up there. And sure, the pass volume might increase. It probably should increase a little bit, but you're really doing some mental gymnastics if you want to get Andrews anywhere close to the targets that Hawkinson would project for. So that's the first dichotomy. Do you have any preference for those two guys?
Oh, Hawkinson. Look at my rosters there. Across 20 plus leagues, not a single share of Andrews. That's even in best ball. I have probably 5-6 shares of Hawkinson. I'm a believer. And with that, how can you not be with that volume, man? Like you said, he's going to get fed there. And that's what we want. That is what is predictable. That is the sticky stuff, is volume. That's what you want.
So now maybe we'll agree on the second one. This second one gets a lot of people frustrated. The second dichotomy is Jonathan Taylor and Cam Akers. And I greatly prefer Cam Akers above Jonathan Taylor, which shocks people because Player Profiler, we were one of the leading companies last year pounding the table. Jonathan Taylor, rookie 101 in Dynasty over Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Mm-hmm.
We were telling everyone you have to get Jonathan Taylor. We can't be more above consensus on a player than Taylor. And now this year we are below consensus in redraft, at least, on Jonathan Taylor. And I'll kind of explain in sort of a simple way how you can immediately start to make the case for someone like Akers over Taylor. So one thing we know with running backs is that you want them to score touchdowns. I don't think it's any contest. The Rams should be a better offense than the Colts. There should be more touchdowns up for grabs, potentially for Cam Akers. The next thing that we want to look at, aside from good offense, which they both check to a certain degree, it's not like the Colts should be some slouch offense, but I'd say there's more question marks about Carson Wentz than there are about Stafford. Moving on, next up, we have pure running the ball. There is nobody on the Colts that is better at running the ball than Jonathan Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
He's way bigger than Mack. He's way, way, way bigger than Hines. He's faster than those. Actually, I think he and Hines are the same speed. I think they have the same 40 time. The difference is that he's got like 30 pounds on Hines. I know he's a whole hell of a lot faster than Marlon Mack. So that is the guy that you want to run the ball. But here's where it gets difficult. When it comes to pure pass catching, and targets are incredibly valuable. The average running back target in PPR is 2.5 times more fantasy points on average than a running back carry. So we want a running back to get targets. Of course, goal line carries are great. Taylor should get those. Targets. I believe Nyheim Hines in a vacuum is a better pass catching back than Taylor. And that's a little worrisome. I believe it is in the best interest of the Colts to have Nyheim Hines out on the field when it's 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10, situations like that. I hope Nyheim Hines is out there for the sake of the Colts winning games. That's not a good feeling to know that the running back that you're supposed to be taking with your first round pick might not be on the field for high fantasy point opportunities. Now, if we look at Cam Akers, Darrell Henderson is in that backfield with him. Malcolm Brown left. Pure running the ball. I want Cam Akers. I know that his efficiency wasn't quite what Darrell Henderson was last year, but if you look at all the advanced metrics like defenders in the box, Cam Akers was facing way more stacked fronts than Darrell Henderson. They basically faced two different types of defenses. Mm-hmm. When Henderson was out there, they said, oh, we know this is an inferior talent. We're going to have more guys dropping into coverage. When Akers was there, they said, you know what? This is a really talented running back. We think the Rams are going to pound the rock up the middle. Let's stack that box. So Akers gets a pass in efficiency because of that. Also, what we want is the massive rushing volume. Just like we saw Jonathan Taylor have a few games with 15, 20 carries. We saw game after game, once Akers was recovered from his rib injury with 20, 25, 27 carries. They rode the rookie to a playoff win, an upset, with a backup quarterback where they literally were just handing the ball off to Cam Akers. And they beat the Seahawks. It's unbelievable. Mm-hmm. So already, just like Taylor, he's the best running back. Pass catching wise, I also believe Akers is a much better pass catcher than Henderson. We didn't get to see too much of it his rookie year, but maybe they eased him in. At least with Darrell Henderson, he didn't do anything his rookie year. And if we look at college profile where we have some type of track record, Akers' best target share in college was over 12%. Henderson's best target share in college was 7%. So Akers was basically 2 times the receiver Henderson was in college. Advantage in the receiving game, Akers. So that is why I would prefer Akers over JT, is that I don't believe there is any situation, first down, second down, third down, goal line, whatever it is, I believe Akers, if he's healthy and says, coach, right now I can take this carry. I am not out of breath. I am ready. Put me in. McVay's going to put him in for every single one of those carries that he can handle. And as we saw as a rookie, he can handle about 30 touches a game if needed. So that is why I think Akers has more upside and has a more stable floor than Jonathan Taylor.
Whew.
It's spicy.
It's spicy. I don't necessarily think it's wrong in any way. And out of the two, I would definitely say I lean more JT. But I mean, you make a hell of a convincing case there. You got to look at the surrounding talent, and more so about that, you got to look at what the tendencies of these teams have been. I mean, last year they kept Hines involved. He was fantasy relevant for a bit, like not as, a top option or anything like that, but he was a flex play, and they kept involving him in there. Even when JT was smashing, they kept him in there. He was involved, and I don't think that's going to go away. And I think, like you said, there's going to be more involvement from him in that offense than Henderson will be in the Rams offense. But
I listened to a really good podcast, the Fantasy Football Hustle with Dwayne McFarland and Brian Drake. And Dwayne broke down really nicely how with the Colts, Nyheim Hines was on the field way more than you'd like in pretty much all those third down situations. In a lot of the hurry up offense, even at the goal line sometimes, Hines was in there, not Taylor. And that if you put it all together, there has to be kind of improvements across the board for Jonathan Taylor and his usage, which could happen. It'll be year 2. Maybe he really does see the uptick everywhere that you hope for. But with Akers, we've already seen it. We saw it towards the end of last year. We saw it in the playoffs that this is a guy that will command all the work. In the game they got eliminated in the playoffs, Akers had a 95% snap share. He didn't really leave the field. And we've never seen Taylor have a game like that.
Yet. But yes, you're absolutely correct on that. And both these offenses got upgrades at quarterback in the offseason here, arguably. And you got to think that they're going to be driving that offense better. It's going to see more efficiency. So, yeah, I got to say you make quite the convincing case. And coming down to it in a draft, I mean, Taylor's going to be going before Akers is on pretty much any draft I've been in and seen. I don't know what the exact ADP is, but you're probably going to be getting better value with Akers there. So, well done. You got me. You got me, man. You got me convinced on that one. Well done, Josh. Speaking of your podcast, on a recent episode of the Code Breaker, you gave your perspective and research on debunking the RB dead zone. And if I'm correct in summarizing, your argument was based on the average age of select dead zone RBs being below the age apex, with the caveat of 40 plus targets. And of 4 that you listed, being Swift, Sanders, ATN, and Gaskin, which do you think has the best chance of beating the dead zone, and which do you think has the worst chance?
So I think all these guys look different than your traditional dead zone running back. I swear I'm not a Detroit homer. Yes, I worked for the Tigers and I lived there for a year, but I'm not a Detroit homer. I swear. I say Swift has the best chance to not be a dead zone running back. And it's the same with Hawkinson. It's that there's no receivers there. We have a competent enough quarterback. We have what should be a very, very good offensive line. They play in a dome. They have a terrible defense. They're going to pass the ball a lot. And Swift's calling card is pass catching. And as I mentioned before, the average running back target in PPR leagues, 2.5 times as valuable as a carry. If you're playing half PPR, I'm not going to judge you. It's still 1.9 times as valuable. So either way, it is way more valuable. You want your running back to get targets. And that's what I think Swift's going to do. I think he's going to have that 15% target share. He could be pushing 17, 18% like an Eckler or a Kamara, totally within his range of outcomes. So I just think with that target share, his floor is so stable. And I've seen those Twitter posts out there where people say, look at the committee backs on a bad offense and they never pay off at ADP, so Swift won't pay off. But to that I say, let me know which running backs haven't finished as an RB2 or better when they're getting 60 or more catches. And I don't see any way that a healthy Swift doesn't get at least 60 catches in the 2021 season. I think he's going to have more than that. Plus, unlike someone like Hines, McKissick, who actually were both running back 2s last year, even with under 100 carries, Swift's going to have well over 100 carries. He's going to have some goal line work. There's really no area of the field that they're not going to trust Swift. So I just find it very hard for him not to pay off at his ADP. And I would be shocked if a fully healthy Swift became the next casualty of the dead zone. Someone I'm less confident in, out of Sanders, Etienne, Gaskin, it's got to be Gaskin. More just because he looks a little bit like the dead zone running back where he doesn't look like the traditional workhorse. And that's what a lot of these dead zone guys are, where they're kind of by default the starter. It's why I'm a little lower than consensus on Mike Davis. Career journeyman in his late 20s that's currently just in the starter's role. I think that's really flimsy. And I think Gaskin has a little bit of flimsiness there too, where there were rumors that if the Broncos hadn't traded up for Javonte Williams, that the Dolphins would have taken him. And I do think that Gaskin did well in the draft where they added Jared Dokes, a random 7th round plotting running back who just doesn't seem to offer that much compared to what Gaskin does, where Gaskin's been an all-purpose back now in college for 4 years and last year in the NFL. Mm-hmm. So I think Gaskin's role is very, very secure in week 1. I think he's going to smash. But let's just say that for some reason he has a bad first 2 weeks. I could absolutely seeing Miami pull the plug, try out Malcolm Brown, try out Jared Dokes, try out Salvin Ahmed, try out somebody else we've never heard of. And that's why I think his role is a little flimsier, is that if he has a bad few games at any point, this is a 7th round pick. He's undersized. And I don't think that the Dolphins would have any problem just saying, you know what, you were great last year. We're trying to make the playoffs this year. You're not cutting it. But I find it much harder to see Swift, Sanders, or ETN having their role reduced throughout the season. I think that's significantly less likely. So that's why Gaskin is the guy that I would be the most concerned about out of those 4.
And we've seen last year other running backs have success in that system, so it's not like he's an irreplaceable piece. And not as much of a talent differential between the surrounding cast that he's irreplaceable in that regard either. Whereas, I mean, I'm not worried about any running back replacing Swift talent-wise. ATN, we've seen Robinson do what he did last year, but that was huge volume, which he is not going to get with ATN there. And with Sanders, I mean, the only guy I'd be worried about is Gainwell, because he is a fantastic pass catching running back. And I think if Sanders went down to injury or anything like that, not like he's going to be replaced, but you know, Gainwell could make a run of it while he's down and really, you know, kind of solidify a place on that roster.
Yeah, I think Gainwell is a really good player. I thought he was going to go in the 3rd or 4th round of the draft. But when he goes in the 5th round of the draft, in what's just objectively a weaker running back class than some of the past years, you have to rethink things. And that I love Gainwell. Do I think that he can be a potential threat to Sanders with the pass catching? Yes, like you said, Gainwell's an incredible pass catching back. But Sanders has also been a really strong pass catching back as well. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's clear and obvious that Gainwell is just so much better in that area. Sanders has a lot of size on him. Sanders is actually I think he's faster than him, even though he's a lot bigger. So there's a lot of reasons that you'd still want Sanders with the ball in his hand. And with Swift, like Jamal Williams is just worse in every way, basically, with the ball in his hands. And then with ETN, like you said, James Robinson was volume driven. Was it a bad pick? Should they have just rode the UDFA for year 2? Yes, they should have. Yeah, you basically just lit the money on fire. I don't know what they were doing. But ETN is an elite prospect. Round 1 running back, productive every year in college, incredible pass catcher. And one thing that I'll hit you with that I love about him is you'll hear all the time people talk about, oh, the mobile quarterback doesn't target the running back. Think about Lamar Jackson. He's not going to check down because why would he dump the ball off Dobbins for a 6-yard gain when he averages 6 to 7 yards a carry? No, he's just going to tuck and run. Mm-hmm. Here's the thing. Trevor Lawrence is mobile. He's actually pretty fast. He kind of has the Konami code. But unlike basically every other Konami quarterback, he also checks it down to his running back. Yes. That's why ETN had 48 catches and nearly 600 receiving yards this past year with Trevor Lawrence as his quarterback. So I love ETN because Lawrence is going to freeze the linebackers because he's mobile. They have to watch out for him. And he also passes the ball to ETN. So ETN kind of gets the best of both worlds. He gets the wider running lanes and the security knowing that historically this quarterback has targeted me. So I think he's a really safe pick.
For 3 years already, man.
Yeah, it's the shower narrative goes 3 years deep. So you can't convince me that when the game's on the line, Trevor Lawrence looks to the sideline and says, ETN, who's been with me, we won a national championship together. No. I would bring hey, James, come on. I want James Robinson in the backfield with me, not the guy that I won a national title with, and we have 3 years experience playing together. You cannot convince me that Trevor Lawrence is going to be happy with the coaches if they're pulling ETN in crucial situations.
Mm-hmm.
You can't convince me of that.
No, you're absolutely right on that. Yeah, I think, again, all fantastic points on those. And I agree. Swift is pretty clear favorite out of those quote unquote dead zone RBs. And I think it's kind of like you got to move the goalpost a little bit with him. I think that dead zone has got to start kind of after Swift, because I don't. I think he's safe enough that you don't have to kind of consider him in there. He's kind of like the end of that tier before it starts for me. But yeah, Gaskin definitely. I agree with you on that one. Worst chance of not beating that dead zone designation. You have a website, that rcodingsite.com. That is R, just the letter R, not ARE, where you offer a coding course in R using football data sets. The people need to know, how can taking this course in analytics enhance their fantasy football and life experiences?
So I kind of made this course out of the idea that there has to be a better way to learn to code. Many out there are listening to this and you're going to say, I've never learned, I haven't taken a coding course. What do you even mean by that? Well, I think we can all rally around the math class example. You're in a math class, the teacher explains something and you go, you know what? I get that. Finally, I understand what's going on in math class. That makes total sense. Thank you, teacher. Great lecture. And then you go home to do your homework and you open up the textbook and realize that they assigned you problem 76, which is at the very end of the lesson. It's the hardest word problem out there. And what you learned in class does not line up with problem 76. And you go, why did the teacher teach me how to do problem 76? And now you're spending hours on Google to figure out how to do it. That's how most coding courses are taught. I've taken a lot of coding courses. That's how they've always been taught. I've talked to a lot of people. That's how they've always been taught. You learn something really basic, and then it's the struggle. You have to embrace the struggle. There is nothing more efficient in the coding teacher's eyes than you scanning the internet for 4 to 5 hours at night to figure out where your missing parentheses should go. And I kind of thought, that doesn't sound very efficient to me. No. So I made a course where I basically just give you all the answers. Everything that I teach in the lessons, all the worksheets that accompany it, you've seen the material before in the lessons. And if for some reason you get stuck, I have all the extensive code and explanations for every single example at the bottom of all the worksheets that I give out. That way, you'll never be stuck wondering, how did this come to be? Scanning the internet, that's not productive. And I think you can learn to code a lot faster if you just get the answers early on. Because if you think about learning a new language, no one's going to say, oh, you want to learn Spanish? We're just going to throw you in the room with 2 people that speak Spanish. And you're just going to listen to them. And then we're going to test you to see how much you remembered. No, you're going to learn some Spanish first in the classroom, and then they're going to test you. Why isn't coding like that? The other part of my course is that I use football data sets. Why would you want to learn with credit card fraud data, housing data? That is how I learned analytics in grad school. It's much less fun. I'd rather learn with yards and touchdowns. So that's kind of why I created this course. Was sports fans deserved better. They deserve numbers that come to life. And the nice thing about the course is that after taking it, you're actually set up for any analytics job that you want. I've worked in strictly business analytics roles before, and I've used the exact skills that I teach. I've worked in sports analytics roles and used the exact skills I teach. They're kind of industry agnostic. If you know how to run a regression, if you know how to create a textured or leveled plot, if you know how to run a simulation, if you know how to run an optimization problem, you can do it with any type of data set. And that's kind of what I teach you, is that here's how you can do it with sports data, but know that these are universal analytics concepts.
So what other kind of applications could you have for these kinds of regression models?
So I know a popular one is that a lot of the finance bros take my course because they enjoy football. They also work in finance and they want to improve their analysis of stocks and trading. And I'm not going to get into specifics because I'm going to expose myself as not knowing much about that field, but I know that they do it. So what you could do is you could make some type of model that tries to measure a stock's performance over time, and that you could sort of choose what factors you think affects the stock. So maybe day of the week of when a stock gets traded. I don't know. That's probably important. Stock price, I assume that's important. The industry that this stock is in, I assume that's important. So you would learn how to say, you know what, day of the week, stock price, and stock industry are 3 factors that dictate whether or not I want to buy this stock. And then you could actually create some type of predictive model from that point to try and figure out which stocks are good stocks to buy or sell. So you can basically, once you know how to work with a data set and load it into R, you can work with any data set you want.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's fascinating. I actually might look at doing that and bolster my own knowledge base on this. But yeah, we're coming up to the hour mark here. I don't want to keep you too long, brother, but let's end this with some prognostication. What would be your boldest call for the upcoming NFL season, and give me your honest percentage of it happening?
So many that follow me on Twitter or listen to my podcast at this point know that I have a love for one receiver this year, and that is Tyler Lockett. I think Tyler Lockett is in a smash spot this year. The Seahawks took a wide receiver round 2. They re-signed their aging late 20s running back to a fairly reasonable contract. They fired their offensive coordinator. I believe everything is setting up for the Seahawks to pass more. Even in a low volume pass attack last year, Tyler Lockett was a top 10 wide receiver in fantasy. Hard to believe with how much he's getting disrespected. Mm-hmm. But he and Metcalf, they were neck and neck for targets. Tyler Lockett had 2 weeks with around 50 fantasy points. That's very hard to do, to have that type of 200-yard upside and to hit that twice in a season. I do believe Tyler Lockett has the wide receiver 1 in his range of outcomes. And I'll give it a 1% to 2% chance that it happens. And to outline that, we need the Seahawks to pass more. Their new OC, Shane Waldron, has actually talked about how he's made a few comments that make it seem like they're going to pass a little more, which is exciting. We also saw that the running back room is still just Chris Carson and Rashad Penny, whereas they drafted Dwayne Eskridge, a wide receiver, in the 2nd round. They signed Gerald Everett. He's not really a blocker. That's a pass-catching athletic tight end. Mm-hmm. I think this offense is going to cook. And if they cook for the full season, I think there's a chance. So it all kind of lines up. I'll say a 1% to 2% chance that you're drafting Tyler Lockett in the 4th or 5th round right now, and he ends up being the wide receiver 1 in fantasy football.
Woo. You are melting screens and earbuds out there right now, brother. That is hot. Whew. I don't hate it though, man. I mean, what has he done in his whole career other than show you just massive efficiency? And with a quarterback who is also quite efficient, I mean, it's a recipe for success. And
he also got the 4-year extension.
Yes.
So Lockett's on a new contract. They love Lockett.
Absolutely. Russ loves him. The franchise loves him. And this guy is, I mean, you look at the competition in that division now. That division got tough. I mean, it was already fairly tough, but it got tough. They are going to have to throw it out of necessity here. It's not like they have a world beater defense to be relying on. There's no Legion of Boom anymore. So these guys, I think throwing is in their future. And I love Everett actually as a sneaky late tight end this year.
Yeah, same. Yeah, Everett's kind of that sneaky guy where next thing you know, you look up and he has 600 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns, and he's the tight end 7. And you think, oh man, I could have had him at like the last or second to last round of my fantasy draft. Why didn't I do it? So if you take Russell Wilson and or Metcalf, Lockett, something like that, you owe it to yourself to grab Gerald Everett at the end of your draft, complete that stack. And if the Seahawks cook like we think, all those players could pay off in huge ways, just like they did the first half of last season.
Yes, before they got caroled. Hashtag establish that run, baby. But I think that was a pretty fantastic interview, brother. Let the people know where they can find your stuff, what you got coming out. I know you said you got that stacking article that you've been working on. You had that Eureka breakthrough with. So sauce all your info out to the people here.
Well, first off, Josh, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun. I haven't done this type of interview appearance before. It's mostly been me guesting and going back and forth with someone on some player takes. So it's kind of it's a unique change of pace. So I really enjoyed this. Thanks for having me. You can find me on Twitter at JLarkyTweets. You can find my work on PlayerProfiler.com and RotoUnderworld. Look out for my stacking article. That'll be out very soon. And if you go to the RotoUnderworld podcast feed, you can find an episode from about a week and a half ago. It's called The Art of Stacking. And that's about a 50-minute deep dive into both the math and the theory behind why you should be stacking. Because I know that everyone out there talks about stacking and they say, oh, you should stack, but don't reach on a stack. What does any of that mean? What are the numbers behind it? I deliver that to you. That way you can really feel empowered to know how to stack and why you should be doing it, rather than just feeling like you're blindly following some advice from some random Twitter analyst out there where you were like, oh, I took Mahomes. I have to have Tyreek Hill because this guy said so. So I try and give you the power to understand those decisions and why you yourself should make them on your own. So be on the lookout for all of that.
And that last point right there is one of the reasons why you were one of my favorite follows when it comes to content consumption, because I always come away from anything you drop having learned at least one or two things, and that's what I look to get out of content. I'm not looking to go in going yes and give the answers before these guys are giving them. I want to get in and learn something, because in the grand scheme of things, I don't know shit. And a lot of people out there, they don't know shit either. So why not read someone who does know their shit?
Thank you.
Which I'm so glad you do.
That's really what I try and do. Is I really enjoy teaching, and I really want people to know that what I spend my entire week doing is to help educate others, and that I don't know all the answers either, but I do try and spend as much time as possible researching to try and understand a little bit better why we do the things we do or why strategies exist. And then I try and pass that on to others, because it's always a good feeling when you enter a draft room or you're in your home league with your buddies and you're sipping on your beer, smirking inside because you know you're going to outdraft those fools and they don't know what's coming. There's no better feeling than when you show up in the draft room absolutely sure that you're going to come out with the best looking squad.
No, I can contest to that, man. It's a damn good feeling.
Yeah, it is.
That's all I got, man. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much again for coming on, man. I had a riot. This has been brought to you by the Fantasy Points Media Group. You can find all the studs on Twitter there. There's just a gaggle of fantastic with that crew, and we're just adding all the time. Dynasty Vipers just got on there. It's been great. Campus to Canton, C2C just got on there, man. I'm very stoked on that. Get my Devi knowledge up to where it needs to be in my books. But this has been the Smoke Show's feature interview with RotoUnderworld's Josh Larky. My name is Josh Smokey-Hell Nelson, and all I've got left to say is, where there's smoke,
there's fire.
Oh yeah, buddy.